Okay guys, well, it's been a month since my last video. Now, it didn't take me that long to get the transmission in. I had it in and bolted up in that first weekend of the original video, and I published it. So I got it the following weekend. I got it all buttoned up, got oil in it, and was driving it, and that's when I started having some issues. I had a problem with my torque converter lockup circuit. Let's see if I can get this under here. You can see everything here. So you kind of see that red wire in the distance there. There it is. There we go. All right, so there's the red wire. That was a white wire. It's a 14 gauge wire with a 15 amp fuse, and it runs through a rocker switch on my dash with a LED light indicating that the circuit's got power. This is the simplest lockup system that a person can do. They get complex after this, where it all does it automatically with vacuum switches and brake switches and all kinds of doodads. But anyway, there's my drive line I got cut down. The transmission is 3 inches longer than the original Turbo 350, so it's kind of a neat thing with the 700 R4s. They're all the same length. The Turbo 350, you could have 3 different tail pieces on here and have 3 different, you got like a short, medium, and long tail shaft. So ended up having to cut 3 inches out of mine. All right, so here's some video of me just messing around with the U-joints and getting them put in. They're pretty simple to do. There's a lot of videos on YouTube on how to put U-joints together, and I wasn't real pleased with the way the video turned out, so just thought I'd narrate a little bit of it here and kind of show you guys how I did it. I used a vise in sockets and just kind of pushed everything together. So make sure your socket on the other end is bigger than, yeah, that one right there. Make sure it's bigger than your bearing cap. And then you can put them in there and just tighten down on the vise. Sometimes you need a little bit of a cheater to give you a little bit of leverage. If you notice, my vise handle's bent a little bit there, and that's from me putting a cheater pipe on it and sucking them down in there. So you got a little C-clip that goes down into the back side of the bearing cap, and that kind of locks it in place and keeps it from pushing out. So you get that, they go in real easy and snap them in. So then you just flip it over and keep pushing them in, and you get them. Bending the tubing, that was a stretch for me. I only had a set of 1/4 and 3/8 benders, regular tubing benders. I went to O'Reilly's and got a cheap pair of their tubing benders, and then I put a mark on here at 11.5 inches, and I get my tubing bender in here like that, and I'm going to put that in about the center. And nothing works right on this thing, but anyway, I'm going to squeeze this down now and just go a little bit at a time. I don't want to get too carried away with it. I'm going to move it just a little bit and just keep working it back and let the benders do the work here. I need to get a 45 on this. So I'm going to go up a little bit more. There we go. So there, I just moved my mark from the center to this way a little bit. I'm just going to keep working it until I get about a 45 on it. I just don't want to crush that tubing. There we go. That's about 45. I'm starting to smash the tubing now, so I don't want to smash it and restrict the flow. So I'm going to stop right there and I'll be able to hand form that once I get it on the transmission. This is just some pictures of the tubing, cutting it and reaming it and getting the compression fittings on. I needed a coil can cover, so I had this old beer can I've been laying around the shop for a long time, so I put that on there for a coil can cover. So that tubing I was bending ran from the transmission down the frame rail up to the radiator, and those fittings there are the fittings to get the transmission cooler to the tubing, and then, or from the hose to the tubing. So all right, guys, I have an electronic speedometer in here. So I bought this a long time ago, probably 2000, 2005, somewhere in there maybe. Anyway, it converts the mechanical speedometer to a electronic signal to the back of the speedometer. So when I pulled it apart and I got my initial reading, this is my calibration chart here. With the Turbo 350, this was where I was at. So I had 10,080 pulses a mile. And then you set your dip switches accordingly like that. So this was my as found. So there's two ways to do this. You can drive a 5-mile course and document the mileage, and then with another vehicle, and then take your test vehicle and drive it and record the mileage. And the difference of that 5 miles is these numbers here. So if you were over, you'd be 5.1 miles. You know, your speedometer would have registered that. If you're under, then you would have been less than 5, so you would have been these numbers. So set your baseline at 5 miles. So you have to go to your baseline. That's your initial calibration point, is at 5 miles. It's 8,000 pulses. So I'd set my switches back to that, these numbers here, and then drove the course there and back twice. First time I had 3.4 miles less, and I had 3.6 less the last time. So I split the difference. I plugged in this. Anyway, plugged those numbers in, took it for a drive, and I was done. I was 70 miles an hour. I was right on 70 miles an hour. Here's the dip switches on the back of the speedometer. Several test drives, and I got the TV cable dialed in where I wanted. I'm shifting from first to second at about 22 miles an hour. I'm going to leave it alone. I've been using the rough adjustment right here, and I can see why you wouldn't want to use that very often. That's just a Allen screw into a slide stop. So I ended up having to buy a new torque converter lockup solenoid. I just bought a kit, came with everything I needed in it. So this is what fixed my problem. Okay, so one of the major problems I had with this whole project was this little guy here. I've got two of them. I had one from another transmission, but this is your torque converter lockup solenoid. This is the simple circuit. This is the guy that I bought the transmission from. This is how he had it wired. You go to any YouTube video, and the simplest way to do this is to wire it just like this. So you have your solenoid, and you have the ground. The black wire is your fourth gear pressure switch, and then you have the pass-through. So this is not the stock pass-through. Your hot wire, your positive, 12-volt positive, comes in here. When you the solenoid is normally open, so it's bolted up into a passage there in the bottom of the transmission, and it's normally open. So there's fluid dumping through this solenoid and coming out this valve here. So the way I've got mine wired is I've got 12 volts coming off the fuse block on a 14 gauge wire, 20 amp fuse. And I ran that to a toggle switch type device with a light. So that light is kind of my trouble light, or circuit indication light that it's working. So when I turn the switch on, I got a LED light comes on. I know I've got power down to the transmission. So I run that, I turn that switch on. When I turn that switch on, it applies power here. It closes that valve and directs the fluid directly to the torque converter, and it gauges that circuit and makes the torque converter lock up. There's a pressure plate kind of thing in the or a clutch device inside the torque converter. So if you can see it cut away, it's just another clutch in there, and that pressure pushes against that torque converter and it locks that clutch up. So this is the simplest, lowest cost way to have lockup on a 700 R4 or your 200 R4 from everything I've been reading. This kit cost me about $50, and it's been the source of my aggravation here for several weeks now. And I finally just broke down and bought a new kit. It came with a solenoid, it came with the pressure switch, and that device there you see, and I think I had that on the previous photos there. So we're running on that. So in closing, I got it in and it's running great, man. I can't be any happier with the 700 R4 upgrade. My goal in the beginning of all this is to lower the RPMs, and I accomplished that goal by 800. I had a lot of leaks on the Turbo 350. Like I said in the other video, it was the original transmission from 1976. So my goal was to drop my RPMs. I was running at 70 miles an hour. I was doing 2,800 RPMs, and through all the online calculators and everything I did, the 700 R4 said it would drop it down to about 1,900. I'm down to about 1,950, 2,000 RPMs now at 70 miles an hour. So I dropped it 800 and some RPMs, and that's going to help my fuel mileage. It's going to help me with any overheating during the summer here going to car shows. So every car show I've wanted to go to so far has been canceled because of the COVID-19. So I hope everybody stays safe out there. Start wearing your gloves and mask and using hand sanitizer, and just be careful where you go. Hey, if you don't have to go anywhere, don't go anywhere. Avoid the COVID. Anyway, take care. Appreciate you guys watching. Please like and subscribe. Catch you next time.